You can do a quick Florida inheritance from home, and you can do it with your step parents and with your stepchildren. Here are the 4 steps I use. Step number 1 for our team is to see who owns the property. To do that, we search for the deed. When we want to search for a property deed, we go to jovalentino.com. There we select the inheritance county, and then we select the property search button. Then we enter the property's address. That'll pull up the property landing page. On that page, we search for sales history or sales information, and we click on the button associated with the most recent sale. There, we click on the button that allows us to view the deed. Now, step number 2 is for our team to read the deed for the words husband and wife. When we are looking at that deed, the first line can sometimes lead us astray. Sometimes people on my team, it's their first time reading a deed and they get an unpleasant surprise and they get a little disoriented because the first name that appears on that first line of paragraph 1 of the deed says a stranger's name. And they're looking for one person's name, they see a stranger's name, they're wondering, am I looking at the wrong deed? I just tell them, keep reading. That's because the names that we're looking for usually appear on lines 3 or lines 4. And it'll say something like John Doe and Jane Doe as husband and wife. When my team sees that, they know exactly what they're seeing. Those are the words that indicate that once John Doe passes, Jane Doe is going to receive that property 100%. In fact, as soon as he passed away, Jane Doe has already received the property in full. If John Doe owns the property by himself, or John Doe owns the property and Jane Doe owns the property as single people, then that's a different circumstance. And if John doesn't leave a last will and testament, then our team knows that in that case, the children of John Doe are going to be inheriting something. When the decedent passes away and they're survived by a surviving spouse and children from outside that marriage, the law provides that there is a 50-50 split. And that brings us to step number 3. We ask everybody, what do you want to do with the house? What do you want to do with the house? The thing that happens most often and what we hear back from most people is, we want to sell that house. That's because the house will be owned by all these people half and half. So instead, they sell the property, take the money and put it in their bank accounts and move on with their lives. The alternative might be that they all live together, and most people don't want that. You can get this outcome yourself by going to jovalentino.com. Now, there is another option, and it's called an election, and it's an election that it can be done by the surviving spouse. The surviving spouse can elect to stay in the house. There's no moving, there's no selling, and the surviving spouse stays in the house for life. But this choice is unpopular for what happens at the end, because what happens at the end is when the surviving spouse dies, that spouse's descendants don't get the property. The property only goes to the descendants of the original decedent, the original homeowner, the one who had title to the property. That's why we check the deed. There is another reason this election is unpopular, and that's because the surviving spouse will always have eyes on her back. And that's because the children who will receive that property when the surviving spouse passes away have an interest in that house being properly maintained. So if the children get the idea in their heads that the house isn't being properly cared for, they can bring legal action against the surviving spouse and force her to do what they want, all while she's living in the house. So that's why this is another reason that this option isn't so popular with the surviving spouse. Step 4, the bank account. If the bank account is owned together and both spouses are on that account, when one of them dies, the other one owns the whole thing. Now, if one of those accounts is held in the name of only one person, then that account is subject to a 50-50 split. If you have a 50-50 split, then what our office does is very quickly make sure that that account gets frozen. That's because if anyone has access to that account, maybe they have the debit card and the PIN, they can go to the ATM machine every day and take out that daily max until they suck that machine dry. So what we do is we freeze the account. We ice it. No money is moving. We do it by taking the death certificate to the bank and reporting the death on that account. You can do this whole inheritance with your stepchildren and your step parents by working together. And remember, whenever filling out legal forms by yourself, please don't do fraud, because you can go to jail. I've seen it and it ain't pretty. Have a good one. Bye-bye.